Scott Peterson, serving a life sentence for the 2002 murders of his wife Lacey and unborn son Connor. After more than 20 years, he still claims he didn't do it. And now he's breaking his silence in a new docuseries with the LA Innocence Project taking over his case. DNA.
There's a van that was found in the area. And at the time, there were burglaries in that area of their neighborhood, and whether or not they grabbed her, that's what he's claiming. He didn't do it. He's claiming he didn't do it. He's telling them look into this, and they I would hope that they did, but the circumstantial evidence piled up against him was so compelling.
Testing on a single piece of duct tape could give Peterson a new trial.
So even if his DNA is not on it, did he have an accomplice? It's going to give him a new trial. This is all yet to be seen.
Good evening and welcome to Closing Arguments. I'm Ted Rollins in tonight for Vinnie Politan, and we're going to begin tonight with a story that many of us have been following for more than 20 years now. Convicted killer Scott Peterson, of course, was found guilty of the murders of his wife Lacey and unborn son Connor back in 2004. And since day one, he's always maintained that he had nothing to do with it. Now the LA Innocence Project is pushing for Peterson to get a new trial, and after their latest effort for new DNA tests, the judge has ruled sort of in their favor. Basically, she said no to testing the items except one. One single piece of duct tape found on Lacey Peterson's body will be tested.
Now, back in 2003, they found human DNA on the duct tape at the time, but they didn't have the technology, and I don't know if they just didn't because if they use up the source, they don't have any more. But the thing is, out of a lot of cases I've looked at, this was all circumstantial. All of it. They never had a smoking gun. But the circumstantial evidence was piled up on top of pile up on top of pile. I mean, you had him going fishing that morning in the bay, out where they ended up finding her body a little bit down. I know that they were testing the currents and all that stuff. He had a shed or a rental building or something where he kept his boat. They found cinder blocks that he had made. So they're saying that, maybe he used the cinder blocks to hold her down underwater. And he had an affair with Amber Fry. He's telling Amber Fry, she's recording him. He's telling her he's at the visual. He's in Paris watching fireworks. I mean, it was just insane, this guy, the stuff he was saying. I watched the case back in 2003. It was nothing but everywhere. It was insane. I mean, it was as big. I think it was as big as OJ. Maybe it wasn't, but it was insane coverage. Plus, I was sucked in because it was just, this guy was a complete asshole. Coming out, he's cheating on his wife. She's missing. They haven't found her body yet. He's telling Amber Heard on the phone, yeah, his wife is dead. It's his first Christmas, because this was right before Christmas. First Christmas before he's going to have without her. His first Christmas, telling Amber this stuff. It was insane. It was insane. And it made you think he's guilty right out the gate. Now, just because you have an affair with somebody and you're an asshole sociopath, I guess, flip a coin. Does that make you a murderer? I don't know. But dad blame. It's insane.
And they're hoping that there's going to be some DNA and someone else might be found a figure.
Wow, look how much he's aged. I mean, he's been in there since 2003. And has maintained his innocence and kept stuck to his story.
For this double murder, but unlikely. We'll talk about that in a bit. Another development, for the first time since 2003, Scott Peterson is speaking out in his first on-camera interview in more than 2 decades as part of a new Peacock docuseries called Face to Face with Scott Peterson. The new 3-part series is premiering on Peacock August 20th. Take a look.
Thanks Thanks for talking with me today.
Dang, it looks like they didn't even let them in a private room. He's still having to talk behind a glass.
He didn't want to be a dad, didn't want to pay child support, didn't want to pay spousal, and this is the way he thought about getting out of it.
I believe my brother-in-law, Scott, has been wrongfully convicted of that murder. He's been in prison since April of 2003. Scott has not spoken on camera about the case in those 21 years.
She went on and become an attorney after all of this.
Why should anyone care about what you have to say 20 years later?
The deeper you get into this case, the more questions you have.
Again, he's got to get around the mountain of circumstantial evidence. Even if they find somebody else's DNA on there, yeah, he has the potential to get another trial. But then again, the prosecution, the state could say, well, it was his accomplice. I don't know. I mean, it's a possibility.
Now, a big reason that Scott Peterson was convicted was the testimony of Amber Fry. He was cheating on Lacey with Amber Fry. She cooperated with investigators.
Look at her there. They gave her a complete makeover. If y'all remember her, when she came out and gave a press conference, her hair was like pulled back and there was little strings down. Yeah, and then she had a complete makeover after all of this. Everybody noticed it.
Recorded his phone conversations. And when she entered that courtroom, I was there for every day of this trial, she completely changed the case. Tonight, the attorney who represented Amber and came down that escalator with her, Gloria Allred, is with us. Also here, Deputy Public Defender of Los Angeles County, Philip Dubé. Good evening to both of you. Gloria, what's your take on Scott taking part in this documentary on Hulu? I don't know if you're in it or not, or Amber, but they're billing it as Scott's talking for the first time in 20 years. What could he say?
She wishes she was in it.
Well, I have a lot of questions for him and also for Peacock. He's not going to be testifying under oath. He never did testify under oath in this criminal case.
He didn't have to.
He invoked his Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination. He wasn't required to testify, and he chose not to testify. Now
if he would have testified, oh my God, because I know y'all have seen all the interviews with him, all you folks that are as old as me and maybe just a little bit younger who was heavily invested in the case at the time. I know I was watching it as much as I could if I wasn't working at the time, but catching up the highlights during the trial each day. And the interviews he had, like with Diane Sawyer and the other interviews, he comes across as kind of sociopathic, narcissistic, which I know if y'all saw the Diane Sawyer interviews, I mean, she's asking him, well, this whole time, you know, they've been talking, she's been interviewing him. She goes, you never mentioned your son. And he just stares at the camera or at her and says, well, it's too painful. Everybody grieves differently. I understand that. But when everything piled up and it's all coming out in the media and during the trial, all the Amber Fry tapes, him telling her all this stuff, I mean, it was just a pile-on that it just made everybody hate him.
He's doing the Peacock documentary. I just want everyone to know he has no duty to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help him God. He's not under oath in this documentary. Also, his conviction for murdering or, homicide of Lacey and also of the unborn fetus, Connor, was affirmed by the California Supreme Court. The only thing that was overturned was the death penalty. So now he's...
Yeah, we're lucky California did that back in 2003. You think they'd do that now? To charge him with murder of his unborn son, Connor? Where she said, I guess she had to throw in that unborn fetus mess, which kind of annoyed me.
He's trying to get a new trial with DNA evidence on a number of items, but the judge recently found that all but one of those dozen or so items that the Innocence Project wanted to test should not be tested. Only, as was pointed out, only one item will be tested, and that's the tape that was found and that at the time of the autopsy on her pants. So that will be tested. So the real question is, why is he doing it? Because he...
Well, if they found evidence, then it should be tested. Whether it's going to be in his favor or not, it's evidence. Whether we hate him or some people think he's innocent. I think the majority, which it's not about public opinion, I guess, at this point, but yeah, we all think he's guilty. But it's not about public opinion. It's about the evidence. And if somebody's innocent, they should have a right to prove it. I think he has a right to do that.
Lost in the court of law. I guess now he's appealing to the court of public opinion. Is he getting any money from this? Where is the money going? Is it going for attorneys? Is it going to him or to his sister-in-law who's pushing to get him a new trial? I'd just like to know the answer to these questions, because he's a convicted felon now facing a life sentence since the death penalty was overturned. And I just have questions about it.
Philip, why are we still...
I don't think she should even be surprised. If there's any kind of evidence that comes into any case, it should be examined. Whether you think the guy's still guilty or not, he has the right for that.
Talking about Scott Peterson, what is it about this case?
Well, first of all, he initiated a petition with the court. California passed a new law, relatively new, that authorized the testing of untested DNA, or DNA that may have been tested with flawed procedures at the time of the offense. So what he's doing is he's exercising his right. And you have to understand that in order to even exercise that right, it presupposes that the petitioner has already been convicted and is serving time in prison. So it's a prerequisite to the petition. And you have to understand that there is a piece of evidence that was not tested. It was a 15.5-inch strip of duct tape that was found adhered to Lacey's pants that was lifted during the autopsy back in 2003. And the rich source of any DNA, and hopefully it's not Scott's, because if it is, we're going to close this out. Well, let's just pretend there's an unknown contributor on the sticky substrate, if you will, of that tape. It could show that somebody other than Scott Peterson is the culprit.
Well, also, how much is, if it's degraded? Well, they did find it has traces of human DNA even back then. But that duct tape was underwater. But with the advances in DNA testing, again, if it's a source from somebody else, I guess it could open up the door for an investigation, and they could run it through CODIS to see who it is. There's all kinds of possibilities. He has a right to do this.
The whole idea behind this statute allowing for testing for DNA is to determine the identity of the perpetrator. And if you have a piece of sticky tape stuck to a victim's body...
Y'all remember that scene? Man, I remember getting on and going, oh my God, they found her body. It was terrible. It was heartbreaking.
Where DNA matches somebody other than Scott Peterson, then all the evidence about the affairs, not wanting to pay child support, not wanting to pay spousal support, and being a cad, it's all noise. Because at the end of the day, the science could set him free. Now, what this would do in the end, assuming he is successful in the lab, by the way, that strip, I believe, was sent to Pure Gold Forensics. It's a lab in Southern California. I think it's in the city of Redlands. questions. But let's say they do find some donor other than Scott. What it would do is form the basis of a new trial of the guilt phase of his murder case. And we'll see. Right now, it's up in the air. I think the lab has approximately 45 days to conclude the testing and get the results to San Mateo Court under seal.
And
wow. That's if the results come back. If they can get a full profile of somebody. He still has an uphill battle. And again, I mean, Garagos was his attorney back then, and he was like one of the top defense attorneys at the time. He's an old guy, really, really old now, guys. It's been over 20 years. But the significance of it is, well, he has a new trial. He has this. How much of the circumstantial evidence is they going to just be able to put all that back in there? Yeah, he's done this. He was here. He's talking to her. He's having an affair. This just it just builds a story. The story is bad against him. I think he's going to need more in the DNA. I don't know. Unless this guy, they find some guy that's with him. Or not with him, but if they find the DNA, they run the CODIS. That's even if the guy's in the CODIS. He still has a long uphill battle. If they can even find the person, they could do the, what is that, the familiar, the family tree thing where they can work backwards with the DNA and find people in his family and then narrow it down to the one person. So, I mean, there's that possibility they can do that.
They did actually test a bit of that piece of duct tape originally. They found DNA, but the defense successfully argued to the judge, hey, we got to do it again. We have to do a different portion of it because the testing at that time was inferior to what we're dealing with. Now, Gloria, if that comes back, Joe Schmo that has nothing to do with anything and is, it's not the robbers across the street or it's not someone who lived in Modesto at the time, does that give him enough traction for a new trial?
Well, that's going to be determined by the judge, Ted. And the question is, by the way, I don't have any problem with someone trying to prove that he's factually innocent if he can prove it. But I do have a problem with the fact that he's doing a documentary. He's trying to have an impact on the court of public opinion. Maybe.
I don't think he's going to have an impact on the court of public opinion, and it's not even about public opinion, so that's irrelevant anyway, if he does the documentary or not, in my opinion. It's about the evidence in court, no matter what the outside, here's the bubble of the court. What's ever happening on the outside is irrelevant to what's happening on the inside. And I tell you what, if this guy didn't do it, he's the most unluckiest person on the face of the planet. Yeah, he's having an affair. He was fishing where he went, where her body was found. And then his wife becomes up dead. And maybe what if the people who are burglarizing the area, and we got that burned out van, might have some play in it. They couldn't find anything about that van. But the thing is that, wow, if somebody else did this and then he, just because of him being an asshole and a narcissistic piece of shit, it just made him look guilty. And he is the most unluckiest person ever. Because if they don't find any DNA, he's still going to stay in jail for the rest of his life.
He thinks if he can get a new trial, this documentary will help him to prove that he should not have been convicted, that someone else did it. But let's mention, so to have an impact.
I don't think a stupid documentary is going to help him get a new trial. It's evidence that helps him get a new trial.
On the jury pool. But let's remember this. He was found to be guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. It doesn't mean for a conviction that he has to be found guilty beyond any doubt whatsoever. That's not the burden of proof. That is not the standard in the law. And I'm sure your guest would agree with me on that. So if there is some doubt, it doesn't mean that it was wrong for the jury to prove, to find that he was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
The story, the evidence, the circumstantial evidence that the prosecution put on was compelling. It made you think he was guilty. If you're sitting at home and you're watching it, yeah, he's guilty. as you're watching this unfold. I mean, there was no way around it. The jury came up and said, yeah, he's guilty, because they were convinced. The prosecution had a better story, had a better circumstantial case. His defense couldn't just knock down all the circumstantial. Or they couldn't claim, well, you can't convict over circumstantial, but apparently you can.
But let's see what happens next. Let's see what the judge decides. Let's see what she thinks. She found that some of the evidence that the Innocence Project wanted to be tested, and which will probably be in the documentary, I haven't seen it, that she wouldn't allow to be tested, would not have affected the outcome of his criminal case, or was not in a condition to be tested, or was not in police custody, so she didn't allow it. We'll see whether any of that changes when the evidence comes in on this duct tape.
Philip, the LA Innocence Project has basically said nothing about the fact that they're now representing Scott Peterson. What do you think made them take on this of all cases? Because, of course, there's a huge interest in this case. What do you think? Why is there a there for them?
Well, first of all, I believe he reached out to them from prison and probably confided with them regarding items of evidence that he believes could exonerate him, that were either not tested before his trial or during his trial, or were tested with flawed procedures or with procedures that are far more advanced now. So what the Innocence Project does is they focus not on cases where there might be reasonable doubt, but on cases where there in fact may be proof of innocence. So for example, if all these items that they wanted tested could point to the identity of somebody else, then that could win Scott a new trial. And that's ultimately the end game, And by the way, the LA Innocence Project has not been around that long. I believe it was created with a grant from a DNA exoneree back in 2022. He was exonerated, I believe, here in LA County after serving many, many years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. And out of his utmost gratitude, he donated, I believe, $1 million to create.
That's awesome. That this guy, he donated $1 million to create a nonprofit to help criminals who've been wrongfully accused.
This chapter, if you will, of the Innocence Project, and they partnered with Cal State Los Angeles and their California Forensic Institute.
But don't you think they're taking a huge risk? It's a lot of resources and money to reopen this case, go do the DNA on Scott Peterson's case. It's a huge risk for them. So it makes you kind of think, well, is there something more to this? Maybe we're not getting the whole picture yet, because why would they look? Everybody, the jury and everybody thought he was guilty. Then why would they take this huge risk of funds and resources and their time to pursue this for him? It makes you wonder.
The man who was exonerated was Andy Wilson, and I believe he won like $1.2 million from the California State Victim Compensation Board, and I think $14 million from the sheriffs and the LAPD, because he was wrongfully convicted. So they have the resources, they have the will, and now let's see what unfolds.
Yeah, well, we will definitely see. Scott Peterson, he hasn't done interviews in a long time. In fact, I believe I was the last person Peterson interview 20 years ago. Here's some of the things that he said to not only me, but Diane Sawyer in that time period before he went to trial, and was trying to tell everybody, hey, I didn't do it. It was, I'm innocent. Take a listen.
Yeah, this is some of the footage I was talking about earlier. I mean, there's more interviews and stuff, but this is interesting.
Violence towards women is unapproachable. It is the most disgusting act to me. And I know that suspicion has turned to me.
What kind of marriage was it?
God, I mean, the first word that comes to mind is, glorious. I mean, we took care of each other.
He said glorious. Now, keep in mind, he's sleeping with Amber. He's having an affair. And he's saying this. And this is before Amber came forward.
Very well. She was amazing. She is amazing.
Another story that is out there is that the kitchen was spotless.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, there was still a wet mop around, which indicated somebody had cleaned something very recently.
Lacey was mopping the floors when I left that morning. Yes, the house is spotless. She had a cleaning lady on Monday.
Said the house smelled like bleach. Now, I don't know if they mentioned that in this little clip, but she was pregnant. Would she really be using bleach to clean? And the house just smell like bleach and she's smelling that? I'm reluctant to think so.
The 23rd.
So if the cleaning lady had been there, why have to clean again?
Dog, 2 cats, muddy backyard.
You haven't mentioned your son.
There's the stare. There's the stare. Look at him. He's thinking about what to say.
It's so hard. It seems like it's a waste of manpower in that pursuit. And that's unfortunate. That makes me sad more than it does angry. When they were out there in the arena and I heard his 88 officers, those are 88 officers which could have been following up on investigative leads. I'm sure there's, in my blood everywhere in that truck. I work on a farm with machineries and, everyone I've done media with, looked at the scars and cuts on my hands and I'm afraid, men, we cut each other and we bleed.
I'll tell you what, if you start thinking about the case, supposedly he had left, and the timeline was saying that she was seen walking her dog that morning. She would take walks. Like I said, man, if he is innocent, God only knows. God does know. He's the most unluckiest person on the planet because of his arrogance and narcissistic personality, having an affair on his wife, which everybody frowns about that, but
it's not a positive thing. I think the real question that you're getting at and that everyone wants to know is, did that precipitate to me being involved with her disappearance? And no, it did not. And I had absolutely nothing to do with Lacey's disappearance.
Gloria, I'm not sure what he's going to say to Peacock. Probably a lot of the same. That he just
that's what I'm assuming. Just a lot of the same.
He didn't take the stand.
I might add that, but what you showed, it says admitted into evidence. So I think that was offered by the prosecution at the trial to help to prove their case as evidence, and it was admitted. So it didn't help him to do those interviews.
No, not at all. In fact, the hatred.
Oh man, that destroyed his credibility. Those interviews. I guess he didn't think beforehand that he would be a suspect. We all know when a spouse or a family member is missing, who do they focus on? The people in the home, the people closest to them. That's who they focus first until they can weed them out and look to the outside. I mean, that's just a given. And I guess he didn't fathom that they would, he's number one suspect.
for him just escalated after those interviews. People couldn't imagine, just thought he was full of it. Your client, Amber Frey, did testify and just knocked it out of the park. It changed the case. It went from, it looked like Garagos had a lot of momentum, and boom, it was over. Would she be, would she do it again if she had to? Have you talked to her lately? What's her life like?
Well, if they subpoenaed her, she'd have to.
She has indicated that if it were necessary, she would do it again if there was another trial, because she has said, Ted, the truth is the truth, and it doesn't change with the passage of time. So she would testify truthfully, as she did the last time when she testified, and she's always been very brave, very courageous. When she secretly taped Scott Peterson, and he didn't know it, and she did it at the request of law enforcement. And
he never admitted to killing his wife to her. Now, from when he did say to her, "This is my first Christmas without my wife," and he's so sad, he's wanting sympathy from her, which was bizarre, which was damning. What an asshole. What a dumb ass for him to say that. I mean, that's unbelievable. But her truth is her truth. She has taped evidence. She did have an affair with him. She didn't know he was married. She didn't know his wife was pregnant. She didn't know his wife was missing until she saw it on the news. And then she's like, holy crap. Then she calls the police. And then they set up all these where she's recording him. And it's like, was he not going to tell her? Because he done stepped in the lie by telling her, he's not married. But then when he finds out, then he tells her, oh, well, she died, whatever. I mean, it crushed him. The defense had nothing. It crushed it. But it was all circumstantial. Just because he's a dumbass and he said stupid shit didn't make him guilty. Of course, with me watching it, I was like, he's guilty, he's guilty, he's guilty, he's guilty. But look, we need to see this. And like I said, God only knows. And if there is somebody else's DNA on there, I mean, this is going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
And those tapes definitely had a negative impact on Scott Peterson.
It was devastating.
He was not only a killer, he was also a liar. And the argument that he's an adulterer, but that doesn't...
There's her. Now that's before the makeover. She came out and said, I dated him, he wasn't, I thought he was unmarried, blah, blah, blah. But Gloria Allred becomes her attorney and gives her a complete makeover, which I guess is fine. I mean, who cares?
I mean, he's a murderer, that's true. But evidence proved that he was a murderer, again, affirmed by the California Supreme Court. So
the circumstantial evidence proved to the jury beyond a reasonable doubt, but it was circumstance on circumstance. I just keep reiterating that because it's interesting to me. Like, now it's DNA, the smoking gun. Boom, there was no smoking gun. It was all circumstantial. And his own mouth. By talking to her.
I have confidence in her that she would be a powerful witness once again.
And it was.
And by the way, just because if they find someone else's DNA on the tape, I don't know why that would necessarily mean he absolutely has to have a new trial. Because, it still has to be proven. I mean, could someone else have put the tape around her pants? I don't know. So I'll leave that to the court to decide.
Wow. Why would she even say that? That it's evidence. Evidence is evidence. Whether you don't like it or not, it's evidence. I am not in a defense for Scott Peterson. He's a piece of shit. We all know that. But it's evidence.
Philip, if indeed it comes back, let's say it comes back to someone they can't track down, do you think that would be enough for a new trial?
Oh, that's a great question, Ted. And just so viewers understand that when these test results come back, and let's say they do identify some unknown donor or contributor of that DNA, the court can make an order that the DNA profile be uploaded into CODIS, which is the Combined DNA Data Bank. And what they will do is see if there are any hits. You never know. It could be that whoever has DNA on that tape, other than Scott Peterson, hopefully his isn't on there, otherwise we would have gone through this whole charade for nothing. But let's just assume there's some unknown donor's DNA on there, and there's a hit. The standard is, Ted, would there be a more favorable verdict had this DNA been available at the outset? So I think that would be...
Well, it could have been. I mean, it would open up another thing. Whose DNA is this? Did he have somebody with him? And plus, it was on her body. The duct tape was on her body.
Compelling evidence that here on the adhesive portion of tape that's stuck to her pant leg, it has remained there in evidence all these years. It does not match Scott, but matches somebody else. I don't see how a jury could convict. I think that would raise reasonable doubt for a jury.
Yeah, but again, the prosecution could build another story, have another avenue, possibly. And all of this is just speculation. If it's too degraded, they can't find they can't get a whole profile of the DNA. Then all of this is mute, all of it.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. Gloria, bottom line it for us. Do you think this is just a charade and a continuation? I know Sharon Rocha released a statement during these last hearings expressing her frustration that this just will not go away. And on the other side of the coin, you mentioned Janie Peterson, his sister-in-law. She went and got a law degree. And she's absolutely convinced that he did not do this. And does that say something? I mean, this 20 years later, she's still convinced. You got enough time to really think it through. What's your take on that?
Well, her opinion, of course, is not evidence. But again, it really depends on what the judge decides. I don't know that she is absolutely mandated to grant a new trial if someone else's DNA is discovered on it. We'll have to wait and see. And I can't say that automatically that a jury, if there were a new trial, seeing this evidence with someone else's DNA, if in fact that's what the DNA test shows, would necessarily change their mind and decide that there's not enough proof beyond a reasonable doubt. They can look at all of the evidence, and of course that would have to be admitted.
Well, with a second source of DNA, and if it's not his, again, it'll be mute if they can't even come up with a profile. But if they do come up with a profile, then absolutely it should be considered. Look, what if somebody helped him? They got another murderer, accessory to murderer, or helped him murder her on the streets. So, yeah, we want to know who that person is. Absolutely. Throw him in jail, too.
Probably over objection, but in any event, we'll see what the jury decides. They're going to look at all the evidence, not just one piece of evidence. And even if it's somebody else's DNA, they could decide there's enough evidence to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't predict what juries will do because I don't have a crystal ball. And,
yeah, I wouldn't say that they would just, okay, so he gets a new trial because they have this other DNA, but they still got to investigate whose DNA. They got to find the person. What's the link with Scott Peterson? They could be cahoots together. So, again, it's all speculation at this point. It all could be mute, but it's a possibility.
You never know what a jury's going to do. But I'm just saying I don't buy that it will necessarily, A, be a new trial if that is found, and B, if there is, that he will not be convicted again.
Well, that is a speculation, but it would be fascinating if it came out. But they're still going to use the circumstantial evidence against him, but they got to tie it all into it.
J.D. Peterson has said on this program that if he gets a new trial, there is no way another jury would find him guilty, as the first one did. But we are eons away from that taking place. We're waiting on the test results and then everything in between. And first up, it'll be that documentary on Peacock. I don't know if you'll be watching, Gloria, but we'll talk to you afterwards and get your opinion. You as well, Philip.
Yeah, I'll watch it. By the way, just because the LA Innocence Project took his case doesn't mean that he will be found innocent or that someone else's DNA will be discovered on the tape. And there have been cases they've taken where they did not have enough evidence to prove that their client was factually innocent.
Well, duh.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, thank you both. Gloria, Philip, enjoy your weekends. Thank you for your valuable time. We're going to get a break in here. When we come back, the think tank is going to join us. Plus, here's a preview of what's coming up in our...
Is that correct, Mr. Peterson? You're pleading not guilty to 2 charges of murder plus the special denying the special allegations?
Absolutely. That's correct, Your Honor. I'm innocent.
That was Scott Peterson in court more than 20 years ago, proclaiming his innocence. And even after 2 decades behind bars, he hasn't changed the story at all. Now, the LA Innocence Project has taken on Peterson's case in an attempt to get him a new trial. The defense requested dozens of items to be tested for DNA. And in July, the judge overseeing the case ruled that a single piece of duct tape submitted to a lab for testing would be it. All the other items they wanted to test, the judge said no. But they are testing this one. In their motion for the testing, the defense wrote about this piece of tape. In a strip of duct tape, approximately...
Well, if they said no to these other things that they wanted testing, but if this one comes out and there's DNA from somebody else's source, they could ask to get this other stuff tested. Like, hey, now we have foundation. I want this other stuff tested. I mean, that's a possibility. Man, yeah.
Approximately 15 inches long was found adhered to Lacey's pants on her right thigh in 2004. A section of the duct tape that was folded over onto itself underwent DNA testing, and the presence of human DNA was found, but no DNA profile could be obtained. Given that human DNA was obtained and only a small portion of the duct tape found on Lacey's pants, there is a good reason to believe broader sampling with improved methods and more sensitive DNA testing may reveal probative results.
I don't know why nobody would not want this tested. Whether it be the prosecution or the judges, there could be another killer out there that worked with him. Okay, so everybody's like, oh, it could exonerate him. No, let's not jump to conclusions. Like I said, he could, you know, who knows? What? Could he paid somebody? Or somebody just killed her, the robbers in the area. They burned out the truck. They covered their tracks. And then this guy's just the sap. And just boom, because he's a dumbass. And a sociopath, narcissistic guy. That everybody just assumes he's guilty. But this could open the door to get that other stuff tested.
Let's bring in the think tank. See what they think about it. Chief Public Defender for Oakland County, Michigan, who represented the Oxford High School shooter, Paulette Lofton, is with us tonight, and former senior homicide prosecutor and founder of the Villalona law firm, Bernarda Villalona. Good to see you, Bernarda. And finally, the guy that represented Johnny Depp in his defamation case, fellow of the American College of Trial Lawyers, Ben Chu. Welcome to all of you.
Ben Chu.
Let's start, Paulette, with you. What's your take on the significance or maybe no significance of this duct tape and the fact that the judge is saying, fine, go ahead and test it?
You know, I definitely think this is giving him an opportunity that he didn't have before. Obviously, testing has improved in the last 20 years. I do have some concern. Obviously, we know that There was water, that she was submerged. So I don't know if any of the DNA would have held up. But I think this is a chance for him, a definite win for the Innocence Project. And as you discussed earlier, I think if there is results that are found on that piece of duct tape, then I think the judge is going to be more likely to expand what can be tested.
That's what I thought.
17 items that they requested. They gave their reasoning and what they thought those items would prove, or how they could help solve who actually committed this crime. And I think if they win on the duct tape, I definitely think the judge would reconsider testing all of those items. And I do think that would warrant a new trial, especially if a DNA match is hit in CODIS and there is a person out there. I definitely think that would be a strong argument for the Innocence Project to make.
A lot of what ifs going on. Like I said, if they don't find nothing, this is all mute. He's back to square one. Peacock just, did this interview for him for naught. Peacock does a documentary hyping up to this, get everybody interested in the case. I don't know, ratings, whatever. But it's all mute if they don't find nothing.
What if under that scenario there is no hit and it's just, all right, some stranger DNA? That actually might help Peterson, because if it hits in CODIS and that person is investigating, well, I lived in New York during that period of time, it might be a dead end. The unknown might help him too if it indeed comes back.
He's saying that the person lived in New York, but his DNA's on the duct tape? What is that?
Absolutely. So it's all going to fall down to what the results of that testing is going to be. Because what if they do test more pieces of that duct tape and they find that there is no DNA profile that can be developed? So therefore, then it leaves the case exactly where we started, still with the same conviction because nothing has changed. However, if they find the DNA profile of another individual, whether they're able to match it to a person or not match it to someone else, it still is a piece of exculpatory evidence, and it's something that would have changed the outcome of the trial, and he will be entitled to a new trial. For now, we just have to wait and see what the results of this testing is going to be. Of course, it gives Scott Peterson some hope. Unfortunately for the family, I'm sure that they're on pins and needles because they may have to relive this trial again if a new trial is granted.
Again, if it's somebody else's DNA and that he's not in CODIS, they have it where they can run it again, run it backwards, find the family tree, and find him. They can narrow it down. That's all of this is if, right?
Yeah, they have been through so much and continue. This keeps coming up. Ben, why does it keep coming up? Why is Peacock interested? Netflix is also doing a limited series on this coming out later this year. What is it about this case that has just enduring attention?
Ted, it's a great question. It really captured the imagination of people 20 years ago. And when I first saw that you were doing this segment, it was hard for me to believe that it really was that long ago. But yeah, it was a high-profile case there, and a few people or some people seem to have some doubts. So this gives him at least a small ray of potential hope.
Paulette, what do you think of him doing this interview on the documentary coming out on Peacock?
As a defense attorney, that makes me so extremely nervous, especially seeing the clips from the last two interviews that you played in your...
Yeah. I mean, even if they go to court again, if anything, he's convicted of being a narcissistic asshole with sociopathic tendencies. He has no emotions whatsoever. It's just... I don't know, man. But it's... I mean, it is garnering attention. If, it's all about the if, but it would open up a whole nother thing, like, who's this other person? That's kind of fascinating, interesting.
Your last segment, he did not do well in those interviews. Those interviews did not help him at all.
It was terrible.
So if his manner and demeanor, so laid back that it was almost creepy, is how it's going to be this time, I think it will hurt him. Also, if he is so sure that there is going to be evidence that's going to get him a new trial, it is not a good idea to put yourself in front of the world in these interviews when a jury is going to be deciding your fate. I think
so. He's kind of repeating the same thing. So he's going with Peacock, right? An interview with Peacock. Remember, he did the interview with Diane Sawyer back in the day and some other interviews pre-finding her body, which didn't do him any good. So fast forward now he's doing interviews with Peacock, and he just said Netflix is going to do something here shortly. So it's kind of like a whole repeat of him getting out and yapping before the facts are even known to the public. I mean, think about it. It's a repeat of what he did before. Is it going to hurt him in trial? Because they can use those clips from Peacock and Netflix against him in the court.
I think it's a bad move.
That's if it's damning. I don't know.
I did one of those interviews that we just saw clips of that, not the Diane Sawyer one, the other one. The obviously Bernarda, and he was in control. He made us take our shoes off. We came into his house, and it was very like, 15 minutes, just one light. Take your shoes off, and my photographer and I were like, all right, take our shoes off, and it was bizarre. And he had this weird confidence. They tested him during the trial with some mock cross, and it was decided, no way, this guy's not getting up on the witness stand. Do you agree?
Even if they did, of course they're going to test him in a mock, because I'm sure that's always procedure, but there was no way Garagos was going to put him on the stand after the Diane Sawyer interviews. There was no way. This guy comes across as cold, unfeeling, like she said, creepy vibes. Because your wife and unborn child are found dead, and you're just calm and cool and going, just it's abhorrent to mistreat women. I mean, it was weird. If anything, it was weird. So no way Garagos was gonna put him on.
Agree with Paulette Bernarda. This is a bad idea on some level, especially given the momentum of the LA Innocence Project now taking on his case.
Exactly. If I was Scott Peterson's attorney, I would definitely recommend against him giving any interview because number one, we have to wait and see what's going to happen with this testing of this piece of tape. Also, if there is a chance of a new trial, even if Scott Peterson does not testify, any interview that he has given and does give can still be used against him. A prosecutor can still put that forth in front of a jury to show his demeanor, the type of person he is, or if he inculpates himself in any way. Also, with the new testing, we don't know.
They could go, look, he's still the same unfeeling, narcissistic, sociopathic guy. Look at his demeanor. He's the same guy. I mean,
what other new evidence can come about it, and he doesn't know the answers to it. So for him to open up this can of worms is not recommended. Scott Peterson shouldn't be giving any more interviews at all. Let things play out. Let's see the finality of all these appeals that he's making before he decides he wants to give interviews. And then also, is he even making money off of this? Because usually in majority of states, you can't profit off your crime. So there's no incentive for him to give these interviews.
Yeah. This is true. This is true. There's no incentive for him to give these interviews. Let's see if we can get a really pretty picture of, I mean, look at him with Diane Sawyer. She's all looking at him. He's like, I didn't do it. Folks, it's all a big what if. We're all looking forward to seeing what's going to happen, but it looks like a repeat of what he did before. Well, I guess he didn't assume that he was going to be the prime suspect. It's always that way. The spouse, if one dies or missing, it's the spouse that gets looked at first, and he's just conducting all these interviews. And now he's doing the same thing again. Now, I think, if anything, it does shine a spotlight on the attorneys that are taking up his case, where if there are people, we all know, in the past that have been found guilty and that are absolutely innocent. Now, our law system's not perfect, but it's one of the best in the world. And with DNA and all of this stuff, oh man, if you've got DNA and you've got video footage, you got eyewitness, you got everything. I mean, it's usually a slam dunk when they convict these murderers. But here we go, guys. If you stayed to the end, thank you for joining me, and looking forward to seeing what's going to happen with this case. And thank you so much.